Welcome to In My Opinion for Drakengard 3.
Mikhail.
In Drakengard 3, the world is ruled peacefully by the Intoners, magical goddesses with the power of song. Our main lead here is Zero, an Intoner herself who plans to kill her fellow sisters, with the help of her dragon, Mikhail. The first attempt goes about as well as you think, and Zero gets beat down pretty badly. After awakening from the near-death battle, she sets out again to take out her sisters. The story has you asking, why is Zero doing all this, and what's the story behind the flower in her eye? Well, the more you play in open branches, which I'll get into detail later, the more the story opens up, revealing more and more detail about characters and plot. And what you get in the end is pretty dang good.
She fled.
The cast is not very wholesome, and rather perverted, and vile. Zero herself is a foul-mouthed, violent woman and isn't really all that friendly, yet she never becomes unlikable.
They pretty much sold their souls to gain power.
Yeah? They can sell their assholes for all I care. They're mine now.
My dragon Mikhail is just a giant, high-spirited kid who wishes that fighting could be avoided altogether. Later on, you gain disciples who either love violence and death, get turned on by being in pain, obsessed with sex and the schlong,
Doctors say a passionate night of log jamming is the perfect cure for such ailments,
or it's just plain stupid.
Maybe the next mountain over? Or maybe the next nation over?
Scent?
Yes?
You're just making this shit up, aren't you?
There's even points in the story where you gather around a fire and talk to the cast, furthering their development.
But I probably shouldn't expect you Neanderthals to understand any of that.
Cram it, Professor.
Now you're probably thinking, why would I want to follow these people? Well, the interaction with one another is pretty entertaining. You become accustomed to their traits and want to stick with them throughout the journey, till the very end.
You guys want some?
No thanks.
The game also has a sense of humor, whether it's making fun of platforming,
Of what? Heights?
No, just all this stupid precision jumping.
censoring some scenes, to just the overall dialogue. It was nice to have these moments to take in the more downer parts of the game later on. A negative for the story is Zero's sisters, 1 to 5.
Well,
They don't really get that much screen time for character development. You get a few lines when you first see them and while fighting them, but that's really about it. This was disappointing since being 5 important characters, you would think you would get to know them better. But that's not the case here. You can play the DLC to get more background, but I shouldn't have to drop $30 in order to find out more about these characters. It should have been a part of the game from the very start. Drakengard 3 is an action hack and slash game. Think of something kind of like Dynasty Warriors. You go from point A to B, hacking down waves and waves of enemies. You start off with a sword, but by the time you're halfway through the first branch, you will have combat braces, spears, and chakrams, each feeling different from one another. The combat itself is pretty straightforward. You hack and slash with square, and pressing triangle will do a special attack that uses some of your stamina meter. But don't worry, it recharges. Each weapon also has a set of combos you can pull off. You're also able to switch your weapons mid-combo, making the combo stream longer and allowing you to mess around a bit with combinations. The more the blood and bodies build up, the more your rose meter fills up. Once it hits a certain point, you go into a rage mode and just thrash everyone, which is pretty fulfilling, and it can be a lifesaver at some points. Thankfully the game does have a lock-on system, so you're not playing around like a chicken with its head cut off. I will admit though, while the AI isn't too bright, I still got a sense of enjoyment powering through them with multiple weapons. I just never felt bored, but I can see how others may feel differently. The enemies get a little tougher on other branches since they take more hits and get more damage. They always introduce new enemies as you go along, so you won't be fighting generic knights 100% of the time. A parry system is also in the game, in which if you block just at the right time, the enemy will be pushed back, leaving them wide open for an attack. I personally never used it that much, but hey, it's there if you want to. There are instances when your dragon will come into play. In the stages, there are parts where a blue circle will show up and you can call for Mikhail for help and he will breathe down death on your enemies. You can also ride Mikhail during some of the boss fights and stages.
That makes her the biggest idiot of all.
There are even on-rail stages where you shoot down some airborne enemies. I found controlling Mikhail rather easy, though constantly pressing X and making flap his wings can get a bit tiresome. While going through the stages, you can find treasure chests that contain money, cards to upgrade weapons, or more weapons in general. Once the stage is complete, you get a result screen telling you how much XP you gained, money you made, and treasure chests you found. Thankfully, the game lets you know if you miss any treasure chests, and through chapter select, you can always go back and find them. Now before you head out to a mission, you can do a few things. There's an item shop where you can buy healing items and such, though you can only carry a certain amount at a time. There's also a weapon shop which can buy more weapons that you unlock while playing through the game. You have the upgrade shop which allows you to upgrade any weapon you want as long as you get the cash and the right card. You can upgrade your weapon up to 4 levels, and after each level the weapon becomes stronger and visually changes, which is pretty cool. Another nice little touch for upgrading your weapons is you unlock little stories connected to said weapon. This drove me to upgrade all the weapons as I was rather curious about the little stories. You can also change which disciple you take with you in battle, though to be honest, the most they do is get the enemy's attention away from you. You don't have to worry about missing any dialogue if you don't take certain disciples, since even though they are not on your team, they still will talk. We also have side missions in this game called Accords or Quest. You unlock these by playing through the story and completing some of the quests themselves. The majority of them are timed, and some even have rules such as use only swords. There's even a survival gauntlet. Thankfully, that's not timed. Each time you complete 3 missions in a certain group, you unlock what's called a cash-in mission, which is a great help in trying to gather a big sum of money. Just a little hint, Atlantis Hands is the best cash mission. After completing each mission, you unlock things such as more cards, weapons, and the ability to carry more items on you for story mode. Most of the missions are rather easy, but there are some that take more than one shot to get down. I know I mentioned branches before and you're probably wondering, what are they? Well, Drakengard 3 has 4 different paths with 4 different endings called branches. As I said previously, this helps fill in some of the gaps of the story mode. In each new branch you face different bosses, so they do mix it up a bit. While the maps are reused, just reversed, the new dialogue, the general interest of what's going to happen next in the new branch, and the fact that combat is still fun helps you keep going. Unlocking the branches is pretty easy, all for one. Usually it's just beat a branch to unlock a new one, but the final branch you need to collect every weapon. It's a bit of a grind, so it may detour some players, but I find it worth it since plot-wise, it's very important. Now let me get into one of my biggest problems in the game. I will try not to spoil much story-wise, but my god, the final boss in the final branch has been one of the most poorly designed cheat bosses I've played in my gaming life. How the hell did they find this acceptable? It turns into a rhythm game with a camera that I'm guessing was programmed by a drunk person, since it goes out of its way to give you these crappy camera angles that you can't even see a character. Let's not forget the song is about 8 minutes long with no checkpoints, so if you fail, you have to start all over again. There's even a cheaper moment when the screen turns black and you have to guess when to press the button. This process took me about 5 to 8 hours to do. I would understand if this detours anyone from beating the game since it almost made me give up. I just don't understand why they would do this. The scene and music itself is beautiful, but my god, the gameplay is just ugh. As you can see, this game is not that pretty. Graphically, the backgrounds, while varied, are still nothing to write home about since they look rather dull. The frame rate can get pretty chuggy at times during combat and even cutscenes, which does hamper the overall experience. I did like how overboard they went with the blood though, as it covered you and even the screen during combat. It never got annoying or in the way. What stands out the most visually though is the cast themselves, each with their own distinctive look and personality. It's also a good thing that the dubbing is nicely done. The voices fit the characters and no one comes off as awkward.
You scared? Figures. You disciples are more chicken shit than I thought.
No, that's not what I...
The soundtrack is also great. I didn't even lower the sound the end credits. I actually paid attention and listened, which is something I rarely do. Even after spending 5 to 8 hours of that god-awful final branch boss fight, I still thought to myself, at least the music is good. Drakengard 3 is still a good game, even with its flaws such as an iffy frame rate, that god-awful final branch boss, and the fact that the sisters don't get too much development. It's still fun and enjoyable. The story and entertaining characters keep you interested enough that you want to stick around to the very end. The combat, while not the deepest, is still fun and doesn't become boring. The soundtrack is well done and the game is a pretty good length if you want to see everything. The replayability comes in the form of the accord missions, weapon stories, and the branches you keep unlocking. I just wish this game spent more time in the oven before being released, since it could have been much better than just good. I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on this game, and for gamer's sake, keep gaming.